say you wanna watch a drama. You say you wanna watch a comedy. Well, you can watch it with your mama, or you can watch it with your daddy.
You'll even sit and watch it with your middle schooler, so you can come and talk around a water cooler. We're watching all day and all night.
Couch potatoes unite.
Whoa, whoa.
Couch potatoes unite.
Whoa, whoa. Couch potatoes unite.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the podcast entitled Couch Potatoes Unite! Which is based on a blog of the same name, at least until somebody hacks us and changes it. Don't get any ideas though. Jeez. My name is Kylie and I love TV. If you feel the same, keep listening and or checking out our website, couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com, as you're bound to find some common ground or something you like. For Couch Potatoes Unite, we're all about the wonders and the unique long-form storytelling of the small screen. CPU, ! Hopes you've been following releases of brand new episodes of the podcast on Wednesdays, as well as new blog entries on some Tuesdays. And as always, we have several more new episodes on the way. Because the panels and I live lives behind our podcast, the episodes are published once per week. Subscribe to the blog or the podcast via iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, via Google Play, and Spotify to stay on top of brand new episodes. Episodes already published discuss a variety of shows around the water cooler, including, but not limited to, Fuller House, Westworld, Arrested Development, Jane the Virgin, Schitt's Creek, Doctor Who, Supernatural, Orange is the New Black, and Riverdale. We've published several episodes in our Looking Back series covering such diverse shows as Sabrina the Teenage Witch, The Americans, Reign, Friends, and Sense8, plus new episodes are in the works, including revisits for Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., 13 Reasons Why, Altered Carbon. We'll be launching new panels covering Charmed, Outlander, the Breaking Bad universe, and This Is Us. And because we look back at shows now past, we'll put out some musical stops for our Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. We'll revisit one of the all-time and most-watched classic sitcoms, MASH, and we'll consider the moral implications and quick cancellation of Dollhouse. By the way, did you know that CPU also from time to time goes live? We've been live from bunkers and comedy shows and Comic-Cons, and we went live last spring from Blue Bridge Games to take a shiny look back at Firefly. Plus, we're planning more live appearances and other cool stuff. It's true. So make sure you like or follow us at our Facebook page, our Twitter at CPU Podcast, our Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite, or subscribe to our website, our YouTube channel, our Apple iTunes channel, our Stitcher Radio channel, or find us on Google Play and Spotify. In the meantime, if you don't hear a show in this podcast format, fellow panelists and I still write reviews. We always seek new panelists for every show we do. So if you have any interest in joining the discussion, say hello by finding us at any of those outlets I've mentioned. At the very least, stop by and leave us a thumbs up, comment, or review. We like feedback. Direct feedback is good though. Save the hacking, the wiretapping, the general social protesting for E-Corp, or at least its real-world equivalents. Not that we're encouraging anything like that. Okay. Today we're around the water cooler and taking a first look at the first two seasons of a 4-season techno-psychological thriller that aired on the USA Network and that just ended its run this past December. Hey, better late than never. In addition, if you aren't already aware, from time to time, CPU chooses shows of all types, but usually of some fame or notoriety to reminisce about and to consider whether or not they age gracefully, like Elliot when he's working well with Mr. Robot, or don't hold up as well like Elliot when he tries to ignore the existence of Mr. Robot. Hint, hint, double hint. As such, this is another chapter of our Looking Back podcast episodes wherein we review a show that has been gone, either via natural end or cancellation, for a time. And today, the show is Mr. Robot. This is the first of a 2-part mini-series in which CPU looks back while taking a first look around the water cooler. Hey, sometimes it gets a bit complicated around here at this acclaimed show. To make it simple, though, in this episode, part 1 of this mini-series, we are discussing Season 1, which aired from June 24th, 2015 to September 2nd, 2015, with a total of 10 episodes, and Season 2, which aired from July 13, 2016 to September 21, 2016, with a total of 12 episodes. If you didn't already know, Mr. Robot is an American drama thriller television series created by Sam Esmail for USA Network. It stars Rami Malek as Elliot Alderson. When the series starts, Elliot works at a cybersecurity company named AllSafe as a cybersecurity engineer. Constantly struggling with social anxiety, dissociative identity disorder, and clinical depression, Elliot's thought process seems heavily influenced by paranoia and delusion. He connects to people by hacking them, which often leads him to act as a cyber vigilante. He's recruited by a mysterious insurrectionary anarchist known as Mr. Robot, played by Christian Slater, and joins his team of hacktivists known as F Society. One of their missions is to cancel all consumer debt by destroying the data of one of the largest corporations in the world, E-Corp, which Elliot perceives as Evil Corporation, and which also happens to be Allsafe's biggest client. Mr. Robot has received critical acclaim. It won the Golden Globe for Best Television Drama Series. It was recognized with the Peabody Award, and in 2016, the series received 6 Emmy nominations, including Outstanding Drama Series, and Malik winning for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Drama Series. Therefore, around the water cooler today to discuss Mr. Robot are 2 of our frequent panelists, 1 of our occasional panelists, you'll get frequent as we go, 2 brand new panelists, and your very involved moderator, all of whom are ready to embrace the idea that our democracy has been hacked. As always, it should be noted that all of our panelists have watched all episodes of the first 2 seasons of this series to date, and will discuss highly, very sensitive plot points. So for those of you who have not watched any of Mr. Robot and plan to do so at some point, listen at your own risk, as there may be, actually there are going to be, major spoilers. At this time, I'd like to introduce our panel. Listener, you may know how this works. Some of the people know how this works, but I'm going to remind everybody, just so we're on the same page. What I'd like you to do is identify yourself by your first name, just your first name. We don't need your whole life story, just your first name, and how you came to watch Mr. Robot. What made you start watching? How'd you find out about it? What kept you watching? And then, how would you rate your interest in the show? And you can look at that through any lens you want, whether it's right after it started, right after season 2. Some of us have watched the whole thing. And it's going to be your rating along the standard CPU character question, which changes with each show we do, which I'm about to read. Are you ready, panel?
Yes. Absolutely.
Awesome, awesome. So, how would you rate your interest in Mr. Robot? You adore this show, the main character, the motif, the topsy-turvy storytelling. It satiates your lust to see something wholly outside of yourself, to expand your mind, to quench your ample ambition, and to tickle your more adventurous viewing palate, like Tyrell Wellick. This show is a part of you in ways that you cannot quantify, qualify, or explain. You love it in the way you love a family member, real or not real. Sometimes the story can be frustrating, especially as you don't always know what is real. Sometimes watching the show helps you to see parts of yourself you never realized were there, like Elliot Alderson. You love the Elliot character, as well as the strong female characters represented in this cast, but you can't help feeling confused and or off-put by some of the character decisions that are made at times. They leave you feeling uneasy or unsettled, like Angela Moss. You love the Elliot character and the general spirit behind the show, and the society-disrupting hack of the story's center, but you do find yourself irritated by the fact that the show is told from Elliot's point of view most of the time, which influenced you to stop watching for a period and or to try to relate to other characters instead, like Darlene Alderson. Do you find the show sobering? It all makes perfect sense, even when it should otherwise bewilder or antagonize you. Then again, you find yourself innately impatient with the Elliot character. You wish you would confidently stay the course. It's what you would do under ideal circumstances, like Edward Alderson, aka Mr. Robot. Were you curious enough about the show to investigate it by watching it, but found it more anticlimactic than awe-inspiring, like Agent Dominique DiPiero? You have no specific interest in the show. You view it as a means by which to acquire and to consolidate power. In fact, it's the villain, the corporation in this story that intrigues you most, like Philip Price. Or you don't care for this show much. In fact, it bores you, and the cast of characters' many flaws revile you. You watched it because you do what is necessary and or because the Tyrell character specifically fascinates you and frustrates you more than anyone else on the show, like Joanna Wellick. Who would like to start?
Hi, I'm Amy.
Hi, Amy.
Hello. So to go through the questions, what made me start watching, I knew about the show before I started watching it. I did binge it over a year ago. I knew about it because of Christian Slater, but when I started watching it, I loved watching it, and I had to watch the whole thing. So what kept me watching? The show. It was just really great, intriguing, and very, very, it fit the time that it was made in. So I think that was really great. How would I rate my interest in the show? I'm going to pick 2. I'm going to pick Elliot and Mr. Robot because I love the show. I think that there are parts of it that do make me reevaluate who I am as a person and how I interact in the world. And I do get a little frustrated a bit with Elliot, the character, and the story, but I'm also there for him and there for the story. So, Elliot Mr Robot.
Welcome back, Amy.
Thank you.
Amy, what other panels have you appeared on?
Once Upon a Time, Grace and Frankie. There were a couple of others that I can't think of, actually.
That's okay. That was a good sampling.
But yeah, I mean, throughout the years, I've been with you since the start, so.
It's true. And she remains.
Yes.
I haven't driven her away yet.
Not yet.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Who's next?
I'm Jeremy.
Hi, Jeremy.
Hello. I started watching the show, I don't remember why or how, but binged season 1 and then fell away from it. It's been a struggle actually keeping up with the show. I think if I wasn't on the podcast, I probably wouldn't have finished season 2 yet.
So you're going to add diversity.
And I relate mostly to somebody who's actually not on the list of characters. I relate to White Rose.
She will be there in the next 2 seasons.
Well, I need her there now because I'm already constantly disappointed with the choices these characters make.
I guess he's going to be writing that one.
Yeah.
If you had to pick one on the current...
Mr. Robot.
Okay.
Because again, he's got that sense of disappointment. Like, make up your mind, Elliot!
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Welcome back, Jeremy. Jeremy, what other panels have you appeared on?
I was on looking back at 6 Feet Under, mostly Supernatural, Westworld, soon to be Lock and Key, hashtag get on it.
He wants people to talk about Lock and Key. Tweet at us, CPU Podcast, Insta us at Couch Potatoes Unite. Welcome back, Jeremy.
I'm Julianne.
Hi,
Hello.
Julianne. Hello.
So, when did this show come out? Was it 2014?
2015.
2015. I watched it in 2015, the season 1. I can't remember how I stumbled upon it, but I was kind of instantly hooked. For me, it was the combination of all of the technical aspects of the show. I really love good cinematography, I love good music choices, and the music in the show to me is like so on point.
He's
and
amazing.
I mean, the score is awesome, but I mean, I've heard a lot of my favorite artists represented in this show, so to me, there's like such a great connection there. Why I kept watching, I was really just hooked on Elliot's character. There were some big twists that, having watched it again, seasons 1 and 2 the second time, and knowing what the twists were the first time around, I wasn't anticipating. I was just kind of along this ride, and so my mind was kind of blown by some of the things that ended up happening. I would say, like, I hate to say I relate to Tyrell in this aspect because he is just diabolical.
But he's also highly devoted.
Highly
That's why he's at the top.
Highly devoted, and he's, yes, you're lost to see
Say the
something only
least.
outside of yourself, expand your mind. Yeah, for sure. Yep, Tyrell.
Okay.
Yes. Which I'm very disturbed by. But yes.
Well, welcome back, Julianne. Julianne just appeared for the first time on CPU on our Altered Carbon panel.
I did. I like that
She likes the complex ones with twists.
show. I do, and good music.
And good music.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Well, now I turn over here. Who'd like to go next?
So, I'm Erin.
Hi, Erin.
And it's nice to meet all of you today. I started watching this show, I came to the show a little bit late, actually. Didn't start watching until 2017, when my brother Devlin, who is the co-host of our podcast, Mr. Rewatch, suggested that I should start watching it. And so I was instantly hooked, and we had been looking for a project we could work on together, and so we called in a good friend of ours who's going to introduce himself next to begin working on that podcast. So I have to say, I'm an extremely gullible TV viewer. I like to be led along the path for all of the, twists and turns of a story, and I never see them coming. So this show is perfect for me, and I think that too is why I'm going to say that I also identify with Tyrell, who I think is the consummate follower.
Lovely. Well, welcome to the panel, Erin. And great to actually collaborate today with our Mr. Rewatch podcast friends.
Hey, so I'm Dave.
Hi, Dave.
Hello. I am the producer of Mr. Rewatch. I got into the show because I had produced, I think, 12 episodes of the podcast before I sat down and watched it.
That's awesome.
And I was like, I think it would make more sense if I knew what you guys were talking about. So I watched the show. And it's all around like a great show, so I watch a lot of shows. I kind of do what you guys do for your podcast, but just for myself. And so this was an easy one to just kind of get hooked on and enjoy the narrative, and then obviously me, Devlin, and Aaron always have something to talk about. Well, not anymore, but we did.
Right.
We always had something to keep us together. In terms of like how I relate, I took a BuzzFeed quiz once that told me I was Darlene. But reading your descriptions here, I think I'm actually more of a Dominique because I kept watching the show kind of adamantly just to keep up with the podcast. Mm-hmm. So I could have fallen out of it, but I had to stick with it because it was something I said I was going to do, and that's kind of what Dominique does.
Okay. Well, welcome to the panel, Dave, and for that lovely table setting as far as your character range. And, of course, my name is Kylie, which I've already mentioned in the introduction. I am participating as well as moderating today because I wear those hats. I started watching Mr. Robot basically because there's a few people in the room sitting here that said, I want to talk about Mr. Robot on the podcast. I had no clue that this was even a show because, I don't know, I'm watching a lot of other shows, I guess. So they said, watch Mr. Robot. It's really sweet and we want to talk about it. So I did. And I kept watching it partially because I produce this podcast and host it in this case, but partially because it's really good. It's really twisty and very interesting. And there are some occasional frustrations, but mostly I'm watching because I want to see what happens next. And in many ways, I'm like Aaron in the regard that I do not see the twist coming. I think I want to see the twist coming, but then I'm like so surprised when the twists are revealed that it's like I'm glad I didn't see it coming.
Yeah, it's so much fun when you don't see it coming.
So, to that end, if I was going to pick along this character spectrum, I'd probably actually be squarely an Elliot. I think that there's a lot of this that I like. Sometimes it can be frustrating. We'll talk about the elements that are. But mostly it's something I wouldn't have thought to have picked up if not for the fact that people wanted to talk about it, told me about it. It's expanded my mind a little bit. So maybe I'm a smidge of Tyrell, but I'm more squarely Elliot. All right. Well, welcome to the panel, everyone. Now, this is the first part of a two-part miniseries. We're going to kind of cover the whole show as in-depth as you want in a couple of hours. But this is really just about your reaction and some of the things that you want to talk about. We're going to set this table by doing the CPU star scale, or if you've listened to panels where panelist Hillary is on it, she calls it the star business. So for those of you who listen to the superhero episodes, it's the star business. What I'd like you to do is think about how you would rate the show overall. And in this case, it, again, can be from any vantage point or perspective that you want to choose, whether it was right after you started watching, at the halfway point where we're talking today, or if you've seen the whole show, how you feel about it. But quantify that as you're kind of explaining your rating. So this is how the star scale works. Is it 5 stars? Holy smokes, this is the greatest show ever in the face of television history. You cannot believe that they've invented something so awesome as Mr. Robot. You have to watch everything 5 stars. Is it 4 stars? It seemed intriguing throughout your watch and you kept watching, but there were always some possible pitfalls in the premise that kind of nagged at you as you watched. Was it 3 stars? There were things you liked and things you didn't, but you wanted to see which things were allowed to flourish, so you persevered. Was it 2 stars? You only watched part of the show and then you gave up. Chances are you were mainly bored, but you watched what you did thinking there could be some intrigue or fascination that held it together, no matter how unlikely. And maybe you just haven't yet convinced yourself to keep watching. Or is it 1 star? Pass on this one, guys. It's a snoozer. It's not cool. It's not interesting. Hacking scares you. There's a lot of blood. Whatever. It's not your cup of tea. There's too many options on TV. And really, there are so many options on TV to waste time on this one. 1 star. Half stars are okay if you need to be wishy-washy.
Why is she looking at me?
Because, Jeremy, I can already feel that coming. So who would like to start this?
I'll go. Sure, let's start off with a half star. Not just 1 half star. I'm sorry. That sounded bad. I would give it 2.5 stars because I'm halfway in between 2 and 3.
I knew you were going to say that.
I am intrigued. I'm wondering where it's going to go. And I'm also frustrated with a lot of the plot devices.
Okay. Which you'll expand upon later.
Exactly.
2.5 stars.
5 stars. I had to watch everything. I think Sam Esmail is a genius. and I saw nothing wrong with it, absolutely nothing at all. So, and that's first 2 seasons.
Okay.
That's my 5 stars, and I'll give you my rating for the second part of our miniseries.
Fair enough.
I'm gonna kind of go from where I'm at right now in the series. I know we're only gonna be talking about 1 and 2, but I'm about halfway into season 3, and I will say right now I'm at 4 stars. Should I explain that further? I don't know. I feel like I can't say any more than that.
If it spoils season 3, no. But you can expand on it if you want.
I feel good about that. I feel good about that.
Fair enough.
I think for me it's 4.5 stars, where it's pretty close to perfect TV for me, but here and there are some plot decisions or ways they use the characters that give me a little bit of a pause, so that's where I am.
Yeah, I'm going to have to say probably 3.5 stars. Yeah, it was, it's kind of right in the middle of the pack of TV for me.
I would actually be... Wow, we have a range. It's
The
awesome.
total range.
I know. It's going to be a spicy discussion, I think. I think I would land in 4 stars, where I'm sitting right now. 5 stars for me is something that really has to blow my mind. I don't think my mind is blown in the sense that I would define blowing my mind. But I do think it's very, very good. And there's a lot of groundwork that clearly had to be laid to map out this story. And there's a lot of really great production value and performances. I mean, I definitely am enjoying the ride so far, but there are times when, yes, I react in much the same way, like, why did they do that? Where is this going? And I have not watched the second half of the series, so I'm going to make it difficult for everyone who's watched it and who might be who's listening to this episode after having only watched a portion of the series as well. So, foreshadow, don't spoil. Okay.
Mum's the word.
Mum's
I will not. That's
Next-
why I was like, I just can't. I just can't.
Next episode we can spoil to our heart's content. Okay.
It'll be so great.
It'll be awesome.
I feel like I need to preface this that I just finished season 2 today, and I'm a little salty about it, and probably that's why I did 2.5. Season 1 was a 4. I'm at a 2.5 now because I'm kind of upset.
Would you like to? Okay.
We can no. I don't want to start there because I'm already mad.
And you haven't watched 3 or 4?
No, I haven't watched any of 3 or 4.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I guess then what I'll do is start with the question that we normally do in First Looks. Did you like the show right away, or did you have to let it grow on you? And then from there, expand why, and we'll kind of go from there.
I liked it right away. It was one of those shows where, everywhere I went, I was like, have you been watching Mr. Robot? Have you seen this show? Have you watched it? And I just want to talk about it. So there's been times where I've said, like, I feel there are perfect first seasons of a show. And I feel like Mr. Robot has a perfect first season, which is why season 2, just pacing-wise, which we'll get into, was a little frustrating for me. At the point that I'm at now, very happy with how things are developing, but that first season, I was just like, yeah, man, this is great. Like, I cannot wait to see where this goes, and that season alone gave me enough trust in the story that, even if I was a little frustrated in season 2, I wanted to see where it was going to develop, because I feel that it is a big cohesive story, and I'm just not seeing everything together yet. So
I agree with that. If I could go next,
You can just talk now. You don't have to.
So I definitely agree with that. The first season really ropes you in. It gets you in. You by the time you finish that first season, you're like, all right, I need to watch the second season. So the first season I thought was just ahead of its time and really engaging. The second season, I tell people who are going to start watching the series, I said this to Kylie for sure, second season is hard.
Yes.
It was really hard to get through. And had season 1 been like season 2, I don't know that I would have continued. But it was because, again, I had trust in the story. By the time we ended season 2, it was like, okay, now I need to really see what happens. I've invested myself. I got through season 2. So I'm just kind of where you are in that sense.
So actually, I would say, I think season 2 is criminally underrated.
yes,
And I know that's a controversial position, but
And that doesn't mean that we didn't like it. It just was hard.
Hard in what sense?
It was, it's not easy to figure out what the heck is going on at first. And that's not saying anything bad about it. That's the technique. we are supposed to be at the edge of not knowing what is what what is reality and what, where exactly he is and what he's, what's going on. It was a struggle to get through that and still wrap your mind around the themes of the story that we already knew.
I hear what you're saying there, because I think the first season, the timing of it is just right for talking about all those social movements, for talking about all those different struggles about debt, for, all of the political landscape, and especially what was happening in America at that time. And season 2 does kind of pull away from that, so you don't have that kind of zeitgeist about it. But yeah, I agree with you. The technique, I think, is purposeful, and they're so different, side by side, a lot of contrast.
I agree with you that season 2 is underrated, especially when I think about some of my favorite moments from this show. They have happened in season 2. It's a slower burn, I feel. Like, season 1, there's a lot of action, and a lot of that action is compact in individual episodes, whereas season 2 is that slow burn, and also you're not seeing all of the characters interact with each other as much. Yeah. It's meant to feel isolated, and I think in that, even just the way that it looks, when Elliot is in his room, and it's just, everything is so bleak, it's so desolate looking, and I think it just kind of adds into that, like, man, this is just really, it feels like it's dragging on, but still, like, all of that being said, pacing wise, it feels different, but it has some of my favorite moments. Like, I think about,
for sure,
I don't know how far you want to get into it, but like, I think about Angela, like, on the FBI floor, like, planting that, like, man, that scene just had me on the edge of my seat, and I was like, this is fantastic. Like, it was kind of a brighter spot in a season that I was like, Jesus, Elliot.
And that's kind of where I fall. Like, I found season 1 to be really engaging because, like, I'm an 80s baby. I loved the movie Hackers, and I thought it was, like, the best thing in the world, watching him ruin that one guy's life in, like, was it the first episode or something?
Oh my God,
the best
character intro in the history of character intros.
And then we get into season 2, and he's so hesitant and not confident in what he's doing or how he's acting. Like, obviously his whole worldview has been blown at this point, but I find myself just not liking his character anymore in this season 2, and I found myself wanting to see more of Darlene and Angela, and I found myself rooting for those characters more than Elliot, who is the main character, so that kind of threw me off a little bit.
I really liked the transition from season 1 to season 2, and that's kind of what cemented the enjoyment of the show for me, because it took me out of, like, instead of parodying reality, like, it's its own reality now. So instead of, like, being things that, we can relate to all these, like, hacker things that are going on in Elliot's world, it's like, this is a fictional narrative in its own little universe. And that kind of, like, dragged me into it.
I think from where I'm sitting, I don't know yet if I can say it's underrated because I haven't seen the whole show. But what I would say is that even though when season 2 began, it was very slow and kind of deliberate, and you're like trying to kind of re-immerse yourself in a world that you thought you kind of had a handle of, it really pays it off later on in like this boom, boom, boom kind of way where all of these revelations come out and you're like, oh. So for me, because they pay it off, I actually, even though I think season 1 and season 2 have obviously different characteristics and even somewhat tone about them, I don't know that I could rate one better than the other at this point. I think they're just different. It's a different storytelling style between the two seasons. That kind of leaves me there. But before we get too far into season 2, I know that's the gravitation right now. Let's at least lay some groundwork of our own with season 1. So you've all mentioned that you've enjoyed season 1. What did you like? What didn't you like? This is kind of your have at it. Season 1, though. Season 1 style. Oh, I've stumped the room.
We're all just so far into season 2, it seems like.
I know, I'm like, what did we do?
Here's what I like best about season 1. I like the unlikely collaborations that have to happen between people that I don't expect to trust or work with each other. So I like the way allegiances shift so much in it to accomplish this big goal. And everyone's goals are different, but I love what happens just with respect to the character relationships.
I like a lot of the scheming and the planning that happens. I like the, trying to get into Steel Mountain and how that whole episode played out. I also really like Gideon's character.
I do
like,
too.
oh my gosh, my heart breaks for Gideon. But I really like his character, and he's featured so heavily in that first season. Yeah, like I said, going back to the music's a big thing for me. I mean, as soon as there's that episode with Elliot, like, having the visions with Angela in it, and they end up in the arcade, like, at the top of that scene where he enters the door, like, one of my favorite songs starts playing, and it's just so perfect for that moment.
Which song is it?
It's Queen by Perfume Genius.
Okay.
And it's like a song that just kind of will stop you in your tracks. I remember the first time I heard it. It's a whole nother diatribe, but it's just one of those things for me where I was like, God, like, somebody who knew what I would like made this show.
Bouncing off that idea right there. So I've been watching the show with closed captioning on just because I can't hear anything anymore because I'm getting old. But I don't know.
An 80s baby.
I feel like
old.
you need that though with this show. You need
Stop
that.
it.
Well,
No,
the
it's
one
true.
thing, if you know anything about closed captioning, is it doesn't matter what volume level everything's at, it will still show up in closed captioning, so you can see the lyrics of all your songs going along to the show, which you wouldn't normally hear. You would just hear the music in the background.
Yes.
But the lyrics kind of go along to a lot of the action played out in the show as well, which is very interesting.
Yes.
And that's wonderful sound design, and now I want to go back and watch the first season with closed captioning, because I definitely watched the second season, because there were moments that I was like, this is a really intimate moment, and I need closed captioning for it. And so the first season, we're talking about the first season, what I liked about it the most, I agree with what everybody has said. I love the different allegiances and discovering who's connected to what, and the inner workings of, like, F society and how they're connected to these different government things. And I found that intriguing and a little scary. And I don't know, I that's the part that I really liked. I liked the idea with the allegiances. I do love the music. That's not what drew me in, but I already know that the soundtrack is just amazing. But I feel like season 1 was also so long ago in my mind. So it all just blends together at some point.
I think my favorite part was Elliot's character in the first season, just because, like I said, he was so confident, and watching him just hack people, and then seeing that confidence kind of blown, just kind of, you see both sides of him. And even if in one side he needs those drugs to keep his, demeanor, and he knows his place in the world, and then to have that just take his legs up from under him.
But did his demeanor changed because we discovered things about him as he was discovering or rediscovering and remembering? So I still think, I feel like we still have to question what we see as far as the lens in which we see it and the narrative, because by the end of season 1 you make discoveries about Mr. Robot and Angela and Darlene and how they're all connected. And so therefore there's a piece of that veneer that has cracked now, and we see the struggles that Elliot probably has always gone through since his childhood or what have you. And I just feel like season 2 is probably more indicative of who Elliot.
World.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about some of the elements of season 1. You're already alluding to a little bit of the twists. I don't know that I could pick an element for myself that I say, this is what I love about season 1. Or could I pick something that I could say, this is what I hate about season 1? I think season 1, taken at face value, is just a really tightly told story that surprises you more often than it doesn't. One of the unique devices of this show is that Elliot is kind of almost in a noir fashion narrating through these 2 seasons. Maybe a little less so in season 1 than in season 2, but he's still doing it in season 1. What did you think about that? And how, let me ask you, since we know later that what we're seeing might not actually be real, when did that start to kind of dawn on you at the time?
I wish it had dawned on me sooner, because it was one of those things where you're like, oh yeah, I just trusted you so much, Elliot. We talked about earlier, like, being led along for the ride of the story, and that's something that I do as well. And especially when he's telling you, what's going on or what he thinks is going on. I felt so trusting of Elliot. Like, okay, yep. And then we also feel like, because he refers to us all the time
As
as
his friend.
you. Yeah, as friends. And so, and that's another thing that, like, he doesn't talk about that to anybody else. I don't even know that he talks about that to Krista. He talks about Mr. Robot, but he doesn't necessarily talk about, speaking to us. So I'm wondering, like, who we are with Elliot, but man, I have, like, so much trust for him, and so even things that it's like, you should have seen it coming. I couldn't see it coming, but I also, like, didn't really want to, because I like being along for Elliot's ride. I feel very bad for Elliot for what he is dealing with, but it's kind of where I stand.
I like to be along for the ride too. I'm not a person who seeks out spoilers or anything like that. Like, I want to be taken in and, like, feeling all of those emotions and that surprise and that just taken along. And I think that referring to us since the beginning as friend, and I feel like we were there when he kind of made the discovery of friend, and the audience being that silent observer. I do feel like there were moments that by the end of season 1 that I was like, oh my god, what? And I love those, and I feel like every episode there's that element there. Anyway, I was just agreeing with you. Like, I'm there for the ride. There's that element of that trust there because of that narrative, and it does make me question who I'm rooting for, though. By the end of season 1, it was like, okay. So I had questions going to season 2.
Just of his motives.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, I mean, he's
hacking. Really? Exactly.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, yes.
Well, when you first meet him, though, he's doing the whole hacker vigilante thing. Like,
yes.
On the right, if there is a right side of that, the right side of that.
But I think he always thinks he's on the right side of it, though.
Oh, interesting philosophical interjection there.
I think the moment that I realized that Elliot may not be telling the truth and is an unreliable narrator is when he kisses Darlene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the moment where I was just like, oh, we've got an unreliable narrator. Okay. And so I kept watching the show.
Can no longer trust him. He lacks credibility by not remembering. So that, I have to say, we'll talk about the twists. I think he danced right into a twist. Let's talk about the twists. So this is the part that I'm very excited to talk about. I suspected a long time that Mr. Robot was probably his dad. Like, I felt that one coming. That was the only one. I was surprised that Mr. Robot was not real, but I'm still questioning how much of his not realness is real. As I sit here, remember, I have not seen seasons 3 and 4. And I did not know that Darlene was a sister. So when that reveal came out, I was like, whoa. And then I was like, ew. And then I was like, whoa again.
I wonder if anyone knew that. Like, anybody.
Did anybody on this channel know it?
Nope.
No. Rewatching it, I have to say certain things fit into place just with her familiarity with him, how she lets herself into his apartment,
Yes.
she borrows his clothes. Like, all of that clicks once I know, but I just remember texting, like, the rewatch guys just all in caps. Like, what is going on? And that was finally, like, that episode 8, I think my jaw was on the floor the whole episode.
Uh-huh.
That was like a goosebumps moment for me. Just like as soon as that realization starts happening, did you forget who I am? You're like, who are you, darling? I don't know. Please tell me.
So I feel like we were living that moment with Elliot.
Yes.
When we make those discoveries. Because we are following his narrative. So we obviously, when he forgets something, we don't know about it. So therefore we kind of forget, I guess, or we make the rediscovery when he does. And that was mind-blowing for me.
Yes.
The Darlene thing, I was like, oh no. Oh, we just went there. What am I watching now? This is insane. I want to know more.
And I will say that even though I suspected that Mr. Robot might be his actual dad, I also questioned that because Christian Slater is not that much older than Rami Malek. It's only like a 12-year difference.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I kept going back. That's kind of took me out of it for a while because I kept thinking, okay, he sort of reminds me of JD and Heather's right now, but now he doesn't. Oh, but that was 30 years ago. So maybe he is old enough to be his dad.
Right.
That's kind of how this went.
And we're seeing him at the time that Elliot remembers him. Like,
Exactly.
as he has to,
Right, yeah.
at that age.
Which you realize now, but at the time,
At the time.
you're like, is it? Could it be?
Yes.
Okay, I've stumped the room again. Good job. What did you think of the twists, Mr. 2.5 stars?
I did see the dad thing coming, but again, not the Fight Club scene coming. Where he's not really real. There's a lot of Fight Club-esque aspects to this show, I think. And there's a big one in season 2. I did not see that coming. I did not see the sister thing coming at all. That was literally jaw on the floor when Darlene said that. I was like, oh crap. I literally wanted to stop it then and go back and rewatch right then and there, but I couldn't.
We've actually compared Mr. Robot to Fight Club, I think, every other episode on our podcast.
When we were comparing it to American Psycho, we compared it to that.
Tyrell.
Oh, yes. I was like, please, let's talk about that.
I was getting American Psycho vibes off him.
Just his smile alone. He's got this creepy plastic face looking thing going on.
Well, and I guess if you squint hard, he kind of looks like Christian Bale.
It is definitely referencing American Psycho. Like, there's there's no doubt about it. But I think that is the opener of episode 3, maybe 3 or 4. That whole American Psycho sequence, and that just it's this whole story of him being in the mirror and practicing and slapping himself in the face, and then you watched it all crumble after he is talking to Philip Price. Was he? Yeah.
The CEO?
The CEO, yeah, yes. You see it all crumble, and then the scene where he pays to beat up the bum. And that it stuck with me. That was just one of those things that just... Ugh.
So let's talk about the Wellicks.
Yes.
Now, again, haven't moved on, don't know if they're important. I mean, Tyrell, I see his importance in the story. And how he's kind of interwoven. What's with Joanna?
So maybe it's not fair to call it my theory, but a theory that's out there is Joanna's the Lady Macbeth.
Well, yeah.
Joanna is... And I actually would love to know more backstory for her. I'm kind of fascinated by how did this woman get to this place in her life? What does she want out of this? What's in it for her? I'm really interested in her story. Even beyond, is she just a motivator and fuel for Tyrell's story? So I find the two of them fascinating. There's some really intense scenes that kind of establish their relationship, and I spend a lot of season 1 trying to figure out who's in control in that partnership and who's calling the shots.
Yes.
And I'm not sure I really land one way or the other in season 1.
I keep going back and forth of maybe one of them has Stockholm Syndrome, and I keep landing on him. Because I think she's more in control than he is.
I kept thinking she was more in control.
Yeah, so
definitely Lady Macbeth in that situation. She's so invested. The whole thing about being CTO of E-Corp. She's so invested that they do this whole, it's a little Macbeth and a little King Lear thrown in there with Brian Stokes Mitchell's character, Scott, and the wife, and that whole scene where he comes on, that's a very weak word for it, comes on to her in the bathroom, but wife is Joanna is cheering it on the whole time, get in their heads, get down and dirty, we want this. And I'm like, what is this in it for you other than she must just be power crazed, but how would she even apply that power?
It's got to be a control thing because she likes being choked too, so that's the antithesis of that.
Yeah.
It's very cringe-worthy watching any interaction with either one of them, I feel like.
I do kind of block out the BDSM scenes.
Oh, I definitely forwarded that. I was like, this doesn't serve me with the story, and if it's a big plot point, I'm okay to skip it. And no offense to any of our listeners who are into that.
Yes.
I'm just saying it was hard to watch.
Choices matter.
You do you.
It's fine.
It was just hard
to
watch Joanna and Tyrell. It seemed out of left field at first. So for me, it was like, okay, get back to Elliot.
Oh, I think we're setting the pace for more things later on, but...
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering too, because I like that whole storyline. I'm very interested in the backstory of the two of them. How did they get together as a couple? How do they know each other? How did they get to this point? It was definitely, you could tell, it's a whole part of their plan, their life plan that they made together. And so that I would love to know more about. And especially just where I'm at in the series right now, I want to know where that goes. If it doesn't go to where it could go, then I might have a little bit of frustration with that plotline. I want there to be a payoff, and I want there to be more.
So one little trivia point. So we were lucky enough to have Martin Molstrom on our podcast.
Oh my gosh.
And so when he did the self-tape to audition for the role of Terrell, all he did was that mirror scene. That scene where he's psyching himself up. So I always think that's really interesting. So that was enough to tell Aspinall, this is the guy. This is Terrell.
That's awesome.
That's so neat.
Well, all I know is that where I'm at in the series, I really hope there is a payoff for at least Joanna. I find Tyrell fascinating because he does have a lot of conflicting sort of motivations and allegiances, and sometimes it seems it's about power, but other times it seems it's about making some sort of statement or legacy or making his mark on the world, such as it is. I don't think it's as straightforward for him, so I'm willing to kind of attach myself as a viewer and see where Tyrell goes. But Joanna, I could do without Joanna. She's kind of in that half star I didn't give the show. Even though Stephanie, whatever her Corneliuson is wonderful, she's doing a great. She looks like Bjork. I said this to Jolie. I'm like, do they use Bjork in the show? I wonder.
She gave me a Laura Croft vibe.
Laura Croft?
I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't know why either. I don't see that. Okay, good job.
I have to listen to that episode.
You should.
Yeah.
Mr. Rewatch. Find it.
I know. Listen, it's on my radar.
Okay.
Excited.
All right. So let's talk about F Society, because that's the other big half of the story. We have Elliot. We have him kind of figuring out who he is and what he's about, and things might be real, might not be real. You get that sense very quickly. He's heavily into drug use. He's got some mental health concerns, and that becomes very clear very quickly. But then the device that sheds light on all of these twists is in fact F Society. So talk about F Society. What did you think about them as a whole, individual group members, the connections that were being made? Talk about that. Because I'm pretty sure they must go through the whole show. So, I'm willing to bet money.
I think one storyline I would like to have seen more of is Trenton's. I think she's a member of F Society who I just have a lot of interest in her. She's very young. Mm-hmm. She's got different motivations for doing the work than the rest of the group. She sort of starts to get close to Darlene as we move through the story. And I think she kind of leads from below in that group, where I think she's got a lot of wisdom to offer. But she's not taking public leadership like I think especially in season 2 Darlene does, where she's kind of the face of the organization and she's out kind of mobilizing people and carrying out different actions. But Trenton is just so interesting to me as kind of a quiet leader in that group.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that I wanted to know early on were the different motivations that brought Trenton, Mobley, and Romero into F Society. And they would hint at it a little bit, but they were so involved in setting up the 5-9 attack that they didn't spend a lot of time on those characters per se. It was really more how they related with Elliot in the moment. And that is, I think maybe it gets more in depth later on, I hope, but certainly you get seeds of it in season 2, but season 1, that was a very big interest point. Like, who are these people and why are they here and how did Elliot even meet them and that kind of thing.
And I think that goes back to the whole idea of being on this ride and trying to figure out Elliot's reality without realizing that that's what we're trying to do, particularly in season 1. Because I felt the same way about, like, who are these people? How did they come together? Like, what are we supposed to know about these people? Because, later Darlene is revealed, a little bit, but we still don't know much about the others.
I think it's interesting to see them start to question, what's really going on here? How far are we actually taking this? Like, where is this going? And so I also would love to hear a little bit more about, like, Mobley and Trenton and their specific motivations, because definitely too, in season 2, Mobley starts to get real freaked out about what's going on, and you can tell that he never really thought that things could escalate the way that they had. Knowing what he's, doing to partake in this, it was almost, maybe for him it's a little bit of like, how far can we actually go here? And what am I willing to stand by and watch happen? So I would love to know more about them.
And since we're talking about movie influences, I put this in the preparation questions. I'm getting V for Vendetta vibes off them all the time. Between the masks and the sort of, there's a 5 attached to the date. And I'm just like, okay, this is Guy Fawkes Day, whatever.
It's been a minute since I've watched that movie, so just trying to like remember back, for sure the masks.
I mean, there's still, in that, it's more post-apocalyptic kind of stuff. There's still a world here.
Yes.
But with the masks and everything and the videos and just kind of the whole overall aim of what they're trying to do, that reverberated V for Vendetta for me.
I get that vibe, and I honestly thought it was kind of gimmicky at first.
Yeah.
The whole F Society's introduced, I'm like, oh, what are they doing? But then as like the show, like I've seen the show so many times now, so like as the show goes on, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. You kind of accept it more, and you kind of understand them better.
Sure.
Yeah, I think, that especially with like the masks, I know, and a lot of the marketing for Mr. Robot is like placed pretty heavily on, F Society and the masks and that kind of thing. So yeah, I can agree with that.
I don't know if this is answered later. Maybe we shouldn't talk about that question. Do we think or do we predict that there's ever a time in season 1 where Mr. Robot isn't a manifestation, where he is actually real? And if this is revealed later, we can leave it. I can edit. Editing is a wonderful art in podcasting.
Isn't it?
Right.
I don't think there's a future point where the answer to that question would spoil.
Okay.
Dave, you might have a different perspective, but...
I was going to say just ask this question.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's, like, when you know the show, you kind of, it's pretty obvious, but all these questions are revealed in the next 2 seasons.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, I'm like afraid to answer some of these questions too. Like,
Okay, well then let's go on to Jeremy's favorite topic, White Rose.
Oh, I love White
oh
Rose.
yes.
So White Rose, played by B.D. Wong, who is a prolific and wonderful character actor.
So good.
He does so many things.
American Horror Story.
Among that, I can't even list his projects.
No,
Check
you
out
can't.
IMDb, it's a long list. I've taken a break from Mr. Robot to finish up Gotham, because we have a Gotham series, and he's Hugo Strange on Gotham. He's just very, very prolific, very wonderful. What do you think of White Rose? Especially in season 1, you only get a little taste of White Rose there, as the possible representative of the Dark Army, the Chinese hacking arm of this attack, Jeremy.
Every scene you see her in both first and second season, it just seems like she is in such control of everything. She felt like the puppet master. That whole how many seconds left kind of thing, I really enjoyed that scene. And I know she does things like that to put other people on edge, so they'll reveal more to her. And then I just love learning more about her in the second season as she goes over her dresses with Dominique, etc. I just love the character.
I love that whole scene with Dominique in season 2 where, they're in the hallway with the clocks and, starts to wax philosophical on Dominique and, goes to the room and, shows all the kimonos and, almost like...
A love interest kind of thing.
Yeah,
I thought that too. I was like, is he going to make out with her?
I was like,
what's going on?
Happen? Yeah.
I think White Rose for me was like all the others in terms of like what's her motivation? What's going on here? And in a really exciting way, because we only got like breadcrumbs a little bit. I feel like in the first couple of seasons, you get more as each episode goes on, of course, or each time we see the White Rose character, but very intriguing, very like, I feel like you're the bad guy, but I kind of root for you like you're the good guy.
You have it all together.
I know. It's like one of those kind of things. Big fan of that character.
Like, she's got all the answers.
Yes.
Yeah.
It really reminded me of one of the characters in The Watchmen. Ever seen it?
that,
Oh,
yeah,
I won't
I've
get too into it. I can't remember her name, but it was just that same kind of character. Knows all the answers. Seems like she's going to be the puppet master.
Yeah, you really get the sense that, all answers are revealed with White Rose.
I feel like she's going to be the big bad at the end.
Yes. I don't know. I don't know!
They're laughing remotely at us.
I'm laughing with them. It's cool. I'm with them completely.
One of my favorite scenes in this series is that scene in the black room with White Rose and Angela.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we see White Rose is very composed and calculated, But I think, and again, B.D. Wong is so good in this role. When you watch just the expression on her face when she's talking to Angela about wanting her belief, it looks to me like it's fueled by pain and it's fueled by some difficult experiences. And I think that is just, and you're right, I think we only get crumbs, you know, in the first couple of seasons, but that, I think, informed how I started to think about the character as I got into 3 and 4. But I love that scene. I just think that's such a fun, Twin Peaksy kind of a scene. And one thing I'll say about that, I think the show is referential a lot, but I don't find it derivative, and I think that's a really hard thing to do. So I really love that kind of Red Room kind of reference where nothing is as it seems.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I'm
a big fan of the White Rose character as well. And when she she's with the hard drive with Elliot, they're negotiating about it, they're talking about it. That was the scene where I was like, oh, this is the antagonist. It just kind of clicked for me, like, she's going to be very important for the rest of the show.
I feel like we're going to see her just lose her stuff at one scene, like, because you can see that time thing is just a control machination. Like, it's what she does to keep control, and I guarantee there's going to be something coming up in season 3 or 4 where she just loses it and just goes emotional and crazy.
Going back to that scene in the Black Room and, like, you know, talking about the show being referential, not derivative, like, I'm a huge David Lynch fan, and I definitely got Red Room vibes in the Black Room, but that was the point where I was like, there's something else going on here. The first time I watched that scene, because I've watched season 1 and 2 twice, and the first time I watched it, I was like, what even is happening anymore? Like, this just seems sort of out of left field a bit, but now watching it again, I'm like, this feels like a turning point for me. And I didn't catch that the first time around, because it just seems so crazy. But yes, that was when I was like, okay, there's more at stake here.
I'm hesitating to comment on that scene just because that's in season 2. And I have many thoughts about it, including the use of Commodore 64 to administer the test, which I thought was hilarious and wonderful. I mean, clearly, I've never met Sam Esmail, but I think he has a very fond devotion to the 80s.
He does.
And that comes
through
a lot in this show, and particularly in season 2, so I'm going to save my remarks on that. One of the characters we've not really talked about very much, who's kind of super important, is Angela.
I feel like it didn't feel like she was going to be that important when we first met her. It felt like kind of a side character, and now you're like, oh wait, she's becoming more of a central character now, because I was like, I wasn't paying attention to you, girl, back in the day, and now you're doing all this stuff in the FBI agent stuff, and Dominique's all over you right now. So I think she's one to watch coming into season 3 and 4.
She's so easy to underestimate, right? I love in the first season. I think, okay, they're childhood friends, and they've got this shared experience, and that's why she's here. And then when she decides she's going to kind of take on the system from inside it, and take this alternate path, that's when you start to think, wow, what's she really about? Because they don't give her too much substance at the start, and you see people writing her off left and right.
I think that's interesting, too, because what you're describing in the show, as us viewing her kind of like writing her off, is she going to be a meaty part of the series? And then you see that she has it in her to accomplish these things. We see that as an audience, but we also see that played out in the show itself. So I think that's by design, but you don't even think about it until we're looking back retrospectively. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, because she tends to fade into the background. She's that wallflower, perfect spy.
Until she's not.
When I was on my way here today, I had been listening to an interview with Portia Doubleday, and she was talking about her character with Sam Esmail and saying, like, I don't want Angela to be a bitch. Like, it could be a stereotype for her to be a bitch, and she's really not. And you can kind of, I think that's why you underestimate her. If she came off so strong in the beginning of like, well, you know, this is who I am, and, you know, I'm going to climb a ladder, I'm going to do all these things, I think it's meant to be a misdirect, for sure.
Yeah, I actually got the sense, just because of the number of times she was written off, that she was going to be important. Like, I never really counted Angela out. When the show first starts, or at least when I was watching it, I thought, well, they're really just setting her up to be kind of like the occasional love interest. The childhood friend he has googly eyes for, who will show up when he's at his worst points, and maybe, but she's got her own arc through the all-safe side of it, and then eventually gets recruited by E-Corp through that shady Terry Colby guy, the former CTO, and you start to think, what? Why are you going there? Especially because that happens after you learn that they caused the toxic waste leak that caused the leukemia that led to her mother's death and Elliot and Darlene / Mr. Robot's death. She takes this up, and all of a sudden she becomes far more complicated, and her expressions become far more sort of hard to read, like totally obfuscated when you're watching her, and you don't know what's going through her mind. Like, is she just dead on the inside? Is she just taking it all in and putting it in her secret file to be used later? Is she truly scared? Because you would think in her position she'd be afraid for her life or being found out, or she has this way of playing this character very blankly, and I never thought she was a non-factor and then she of course becomes a big factor. So I don't know if this makes any sense. But
No, it does, because what I think of when you're speaking is like, actually, yeah, absolutely. Because there are moments where she's you think like, is she doubting herself? And then she turns.
Yeah. And
then she'll make a demand, or she'll defend herself, or she'll say a statement where you're like, oh, it's there. It's under the surface, but it's revealing itself when she needs it to, or I wouldn't say defends herself. I think it's just another layer that we're seeing of her capabilities of like, you can't write me off now. This is the choices I made. This is what I've asked for. This is what I want. Or this is what I'm going to do, or whatever the motivation is in that moment.
And the whole interplay with Terry and then later with Philip Price in season 2, I'm just watching her like, do you really know what you're doing? If you do, why are you doing it? If you don't, do you realize where you are? What have you become them? Like, are you becoming the evil corporation people, or are you just, I don't know, I'm losing my words, because that's how I feel when I'm watching her sometimes.
It's hard,
I don't know what to say about Angela, but I never thought she was because there were way too many people saying she was nothing at first, and I was like, nope, she's not nothing.
I think it's so funny too that we're talking about her in this sense, because I'm thinking now back to like how she's listening to those affirmations and how she's like really creating this sense of self. And so as you kind of watch her character move through this storyline, you're kind of thinking, well, I'm thinking, watching her, like, she's probably telling herself in her head, like, yep, I am confident. I can do this. So I thought that was, like, a really interesting point watching, and, like, seeing her desk, too, how she's got, like, the motivational, like, little sticky notes up there, and I love thinking about, what her day looks like. Is she starting her day like that? She's, taking the train to work, and she's thinking of these affirmations, and then it kind of makes a little more sense as things go on of how she is building this confidence to do what she's doing.
Well, and I'm just curious, like, I can definitely see how much longer it's going to take for her to be smacking herself in the face in the mirror in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, turning into that Terrell character. She's doing whatever it takes.
I have nothing to say.
That'd be a twist, wouldn't it?
Me having nothing to say, or her smacking herself?
Both.
Jeez. Well, I think there's definitely more to watch with Angela, and we'll get there as we're kind of progressing now towards the end of this season. I don't know if there's any particular plot point, though, before I ask this next question, that you didn't like in season 1 particularly. I know you're like, this is the perfect first season of a show that could exist. But what didn't you like watching that first season? So we'll take season 2 apart for a second. We'll get there. Was there something about season 1 that kind of caught you off or made you think, I don't know about this show, or I don't know where this is going?
I think I didn't really like some of the interactions with some of the members of S Society, but looking back on it, I think it was just because I didn't know enough about them yet, so I wasn't as heavily invested in them. But while watching, that's what I thought. But again, looking back, I would just know enough.
That one's a hard one for me to answer because I know too much. So
I've seen too much.
I've seen things.
I obviously, as I said earlier, it engaged me, and I gave it the 5 stars. So, I mean, there's no way I can really answer that without contradicting myself. But I also don't have an answer.
So everybody thought it was perfect. Even you, Dave, you gave it 3.5 stars. That was kind of like a milquetoast rating.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it.
I made 55 episodes of a show about it. There's nothing wrong.
It's fine, I guess.
That's a great endorsement.
That's just how I feel like the first season. Like, there's nothing I really watched or I was like, I don't know. I guess like the introduction to Society, I was like, sweet, we got a superhero show now.
Well, there's a lot of them.
See season 1 again for the first time.
Yeah.
That's what I wish. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good point, yeah.
That's true. I mean, you'll never have that sense of surprise, which actually segues nicely into my next question to kind of round out season 1. So one of the things that you learn it early on, sort of kind of with the Coney Island scene where Mr. Robot is sitting on the railing with Elliot, and they're kind of talking about Elliot's father, who you do not know is the same person yet, having the terminal illness, and he was asked not to tell their mother, and then he did tell mother, and Elliot's father pushes him off the railing. Mr. Robot pushes him off the railing as some sort of punishment, which then, of course, now that you're looking back on it, you're like, that was like self-punishment. Oh, no. But then as the season progresses, what you learn is that this is the seed of something that actually happened, that Elliot's father pushed Elliot out of a window. One of the things that may be answered later, and again, we can edit, did they in the moment explain that to your satisfaction, why that even happened to begin with, or is that something that you think will be revealed later or is revealed later? Does that make sense? Amy has a look on her face.
I'm not sure how to answer this really.
Does it get explored later?
It does, yeah.
Then we'll leave it. We'll leave it.
Okay.
I did this on purpose.
Mr. Rewatch doesn't want to answer it either.
I know. That's fine. That's fine. We'll leave it. That's
Believe it
cool.
or not, the Mr. Robot character is very important to the show.
I am shocked and appalled to learn this.
Man, I gotta go back and rewatch it.
What I will say about like that whole, because I have not watched the whole thing. I do not know. There's a lot that Elliot has taken from his childhood that has followed him into his adult life, particularly with his mental health. And you see in flashbacks a lot of the interaction between his father and him, but like. Something that hasn't been explored for me yet is what his relationship was like within the entire family. You really do not see a lot about his mother. And I have not seen the whole thing, I don't know, but that's one of those points where I would really like to know more about it, especially in relation to that particular incident, because, why did Mr. Robot want to keep that from Elliot's mother? Like what happened there that's not been explored yet. So
and she comes up often in his mental state, because I don't think it's a hallucination. It's just his dream worlds or his flashbacks or whatever he's thinking about. You do see her, and you're just like I had that sense too. Actually, leaving both of these seasons, to know more about Mom. We know what we know about Dad, or what we think we know, but we don't know a whole lot about Mom.
So let's talk about season 2. Some of us didn't like it as much. Some of it thought it was equal. I'll raise my hand. And some thought it was criminally underrated, I think was the quote.
Taking a strong position on this one. Yes.
So
I think it's safe to say the rewatch team is a big fan of season 2.
Okay. Oh, I mean, and it is. It's a great season. I mean, it really is. But that's not to say that it was great in that it wasn't easy, and that's what I take away from it. But
it
wasn't
easy as in it was challenging to watch? Challenging for your mind to sort of...
Yes, as well it should be, though. Because it's Sam Esmail, and he's a genius.
Amy goes with hashtag Sam Esmail's a genius.
He is. That's what I say in our Mr. Robot Facebook group.
I'll make sure to put that on the post. So.
I don't know if it's my favorite season, but I definitely agree with them. It's a great season. I just found it personally.
Well, Jeremy, I think this is the natural place for your rant now.
Well, just in season 2 in general, I did find it kind of hard to follow. I actually took notes on season 2 the second time I tried to run through it, because I only got 2 or 3 episodes in the first time. So I took notes. And I jotted down a lot of, actually, the things I really liked about season 2. I didn't jot down a lot of the negatives.
Well, then why are you ranting?
Because actually, I felt like I could remember the negatives more, and I needed to actually write down the positives, because there weren't very many.
Oh, boy. Okay.
But, no, I'm sure it's going to be one of those seasons where it's like hindsight. It's going to look better from a point of in the future after I've watched season 3 and 4. I know it will. But there were a few things that I really liked and really disliked about it, though.
So, this is the time to talk
So
about
I
it.
did like all the little homages to Fight Club in season 2. There was cutting off the bull's balls.
Yes, that's what
That's
happened.
very Fight Clubby. I liked a lot of the rant about religion was really spot on to me. Some things I didn't like, I felt it was too disjointed. It was constantly going back and forth, which was kind of hard to follow, especially when you're like me and you're watching it after a 12-hour workday and you're like, oh my god, where am I at now? So jumping back and forth between everybody's point of view seemed a little chaotic to me, especially after you get halfway through and realize that the first he wasn't actually having those interactions the way they were portrayed. They were portrayed in prison, which was really cool, but again, it took a lot for me to watch this season. I don't really know what else I want to say.
You can't watch it casually. You definitely have to be in it.
I think that's true of the whole show. You cannot have the second screen experience, and you have to be willing to
I started a couple
focus on
episodes over, because I'm like, wait a minute, nope, I was zoned out a little bit. I got to start this one over, because I was losing myself in it.
So let's talk about prison. Did you realize that's where he was beforehand?
I knew as soon as he was doing the diner conversations with, I can't remember the guy.
Leon.
I'm like, something's weird here. I didn't quite know exactly what it was, but I knew it was something strange.
But he was talking about Seinfeld in a diner. Made total sense.
There were no women in it.
There was no women.
I never noticed that.
that.
I did not know he was in prison until they revealed it, and that was a major thing for me. I just didn't connect those dots.
I didn't either.
Well, they even set up like the mother as the warden, kind of, or not the warden, but the guard, kind of standing outside his room. I don't know, maybe subconsciously I just realized there was no women in it. I'm like, what's going on here? What is this?
I did not know that he was in prison. I thought for the longest time that it was a manifestation of his mind, because every time Mr. Robot pulled a gun on him and shot him, and he bled, but he lived, I was like, something's not right here, and I know it's not real. Mm-hmm. So I don't think the woman outside the doors is real, and I'm pretty sure what we're watching outside of the room is not real. But it didn't land for me in a way until Craig Robinson's character, Daryl from The Office, for those of you who are keeping track, he appeared on the scene.
I look familiar.
Yep. The warehouse manager on The Office. He started coming around, and then he seemed like a nice enough guy, and they were playing the chess and doing the thing, and then all of a sudden he needs him to set up a website, but don't look at it. And I was like, okay, hold on. No, something is not right here. And I just had this suspicion that he was kind of a corrupt somebody. And of course it's a corrupt warden, there's always a corrupt warden. But I just knew something was wrong. I didn't know that it was prison.
Well, and I kept thinking, especially at the basketball scenes, I'm like, wait a minute, basketball? This is Elliot, he's a hacker, he doesn't go outside, he doesn't play sports.
Like, what is he doing? Yeah, like, I didn't know how
but
he
they
came
at least
upon
took
all
some
that.
time to explain that, because he just would say, this is what I was doing to keep Mr. Robot away. I was concentrating on Leon. I was watching the basketball.
Living that
I was
structured
writing
life.
Writing in the journal.
Correct.
Yep.
So even though I agree with you, it's not something he would normally do. He actually explicitly said, I'm doing this because.
And it was so heavily explained that it was believable. It was like, yeah, I guess he now has put himself in this position to watch these games, to meet Leon somehow. You know, all of these things where I thought, okay, but there's still something I'm not getting, but I guess he's just forcing himself to do these normal things. Like, that's how I explained it in my mind.
I think I took the same approach as you, right? He's trying it as a self-improvement strategy. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm the most gullible viewer you'll ever have.
Oh no, I think I got you beat there.
It's like a New Year's resolution. So, obviously, complete shock to me to find out that he was in prison.
Yeah, I was shocked shocked too. I didn't even think. I thought he did just go home to live with his mom. I was like, okay, this is his life now.
Well, I kept wondering why there was no interactions with Darlene the whole time or anybody else. I was
She
just
did
like,
come to visit him once
She came-
because she needed his help as they hacked into the FBI.
That's
Right,
right.
and she's
Because she
in
says
New
long time
York,
no
and
see.
they're in New Jersey, right? Like that's where his mom lives.
Right.
Yeah, yep.
So there's distance there.
Yeah.
But
It's
watching
very
it,
believable. That's all I have to say. It's very believable.
I'm with you on being a gullible viewer, and also
Amen.
again, like trusting Elliot. Know that I shouldn't, but I continue to do so. And like I knew that something was off just because of the interactions and the complete isolation and how people would come visit him one at a time and how that all played out. But did not know that it was prison. But in that reveal, I love how he's explaining to us like. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I had to lie to you. I don't want to lie to you anymore. I'm like, I'll take your apology, Elliot. I forgive you, and I see you.
And I'll believe you next time again.
100%. You're gonna build something else that I'm just gonna not.
You're just gonna build your house of cards and knock it down again.
Yes.
Well, this is one of the things that I thought was brilliant about the season, was the prison reveal, because for the longest time, I might have landed in the season 2 is not as good as season 1, but when that reveal happened, I was like, whoa, holy crap. And it also validated something in me, because I was like, I knew there was something wrong about this. So, just didn't know what it was.
I think too, like that reveal. I think was in episode 7.
Yeah.
And so that's a really long time for Elliot to be isolated from the others in those interactions. And I think that's why because for me it did feel long, especially watching it the first time around. The second time I started to kind of understand a little bit more, but watching it the second time around, I was like, yeah, this is why this feels long, is because the reveal comes in episode 7. And then things start moving along again a little bit faster.
Then it's domino after domino.
Domino after domino, absolutely. But I also don't know that I would have had it any other way. That being said, it's one of those things where, yep, it was slow, but I'm not mad at it. I'm not mad.
It rewarded me for my perseverance.
I think so. Yeah.
Also, going back to like the technical aspect of the reveal, I love how there's that shot of him sitting in the group, and it's from the perspective of behind him as he's looking out on the group, and as the camera pans, everybody's dressed in their normal civilian clothes, and then eventually it's all the orange jumpsuits, and just the way
so
that is filmed, and the light in the room with Krista, as soon as she says to him, "Where do you think you are, Elliot?" and the light goes off, and then it's that slow reveal, like, just the technical aspects alone of that are just so impressive.
I want to bounce off this. There is a very few shows that I can say, and I of course watch a lot of TV, there's very few shows that I can say are as brilliantly directed as this one is.
Edited.
Edited. This one is so meticulous. And every time these reveals happen, I am blown away by that. And you mentioned the music when we were talking about season 1. So I'm kind of hip. I can't identify all the musics, but one I talked to Amy about this one, when the use of Take Me Home by Phil Collins, when they're burning the money. As it starts off very, very quietly in the background, you're like, oh, hey, I know that song. That one's good. And then it just kind of slowly builds, and you're feeling like, what is going on with this song, which also is a song that gives me chills naturally. Like, I like Phil Collins. I have no shame in my game. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
So
Phil can do no wrong.
Phil can do no wrong. So there's just these uses that are simply amazing and hit like big punctuation marks on certain moments.
Yeah.
And season 2, I thought, probably more effectively than season 1 used the music. Sorry, I just went on a thing. Did somebody know?
No, I love that. I love that because I love talking about the music, so yeah.
I love talking about the music too, because like Matt Quayle is very prolific.
Yeah.
Oh, he is.
Does all the sound for American Horror Story.
Yes,
he does. I
which we
didn't
cover
know
on
that.
our podcast.
Oh.
Yeah, so he's just a very he really understands the tone of the show and kind of gives it its own added layer of tone.
Yeah.
He does a very good job at that.
I agree. I absolutely love this. The scoring is unique in that he doesn't rely on a single style. There are times when he's using, standard orchestral elements. There are other times when it's completely engineered. And you're just thinking how creative is this guy to just think this is the sound that this scene or this group of scenes requires, or this episode. And it's different from episode to episode. So if you do go back and rewatch, and you have ears like I do when you're zoning in on things, listen to how different the music is from episode to episode. It's fascinating. Okay, I was passionate. Sorry.
Don't apologize. We love it.
I have a question.
Hashtag passion.
What did everybody think about the Alderson family vacation episode?
The Full House aspect.
Yeah.
With the very violent elf.
Shockingly violent elf.
Shockingly, not even caring about eating cats at that moment.
I think it was such a shocking departure until we learned why. It was like, watching it all in retrospective now, it's like this is the brand, these shocking elements. But what I found interesting about that, especially watching it now, is like Mr. Robot explains why Elliot was in that state and what he was hiding from him. But then later in the season, we learn that Elliot created this world to mask the prison. So there are these layers of these worlds within worlds, and it's all in his head, which I find so fascinating. Where it's like, oh my god, I feel like it's an entire, like, a universe in his head that he strips layers and he creates these worlds to cope.
Partitions little pieces off here and there.
Partitions, that's a computer word. Good
yes,
job.
Very nice. So that's what I felt about it. At first it was like, okay, what's going on? Until we explained why he was seeing all of that, even though it was still really disturbing.
I know.
But so funny.
I just find it ironic that I ranted about Full House before we started.
Oh my.
And then I'm reminded of this episode.
Yeah.
It caught me off guard, and I was like, what is going on? But they explain it.
I'm actually a very big fan of, like, the absurd and absurdity. When this episode started, I was like, I'm all in.
Yeah.
It turned into probably one of the greatest episodes of TV ever made.
Wow. Bold claim.
I think it's, like, aesthetically perfect.
Yeah. Yep. I totally agree with that. It's times like this when you're seeing how deep Elliot's dissociation goes, and that really gives me a lot of empathy for him. Like, despite that, you know the choices that Mr. Robot is making, and it is Elliot, it's a part of Elliot, I just feel for him because, something's happened to him where he feels that he has to create levels and boundaries and layers in between what really is real. And yeah, I feel for Elliot. Do
they explain later what triggers his dissociative personality disorder? Is that explained later?
Yes.
Okay,
yep.
Then I won't ask
I don't go there because you're not going to want it.
I don't even want it when it comes.
It's true. She's totally right.
Oh, look at that foreshadowing.
Yes.
Oh no, now I'm worried.
You're in for a ride is what I'll say.
Oh,
It's
no.
challenging. When we talk about hard viewing, it's a hard storyline, but it's very well executed, I'd say.
I agree with her.
Boy.
See, in my mind, I've built up his delusions to be a very in-depth coping mechanism, almost like he's slowly letting little pieces of the truth come through to his consciousness. So it makes you wonder how much of Mr. Robot is himself trying to tell himself what is actually real and what actually happened when he was a kid. And I know it's going to come back to the dad and the mom.
Jeremy's so smart.
Yes.
Well, look at the mom. The mom is the silent observer the whole time. She doesn't say
talk,
anything.
No.
It's almost like the person who sits by and lets somebody get abused as a kid.
Yeah.
That's what I keep seeing in my head.
Yep, and the way that she is portrayed
You're right.
in that...
I feel it. You're right.
Well, and the dad is so fatherly in the beginning. He's explaining things. He's Mr. Robot. He's got all the answers. He's leading you. He's teaching you. And then into season 2, he's more aggressive. He's dominant. He's shooting his son in the head. Yeah. He's becoming abusive. So I think it's more that truth leaking into his delusions.
Yeah, and the only time that...
Isn't it fascinating, people who have finished the show, what the rest of us are doing right now?
I absolutely love it.
Been there.
I love it. Yep.
The most that we see, Elliot's mom interact with Elliot, I think, is in this episode. And
in the Full House episode.
It's not a really flattering portrayal.
No.
So that to me says that there's a lot more going on here, and there's a reason why she's portrayed in his dissociation the way that she is.
As his guard.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I think these are suitable theories, and no one's confirming them. So we'll talk about them in depth, I'm sure, in our next episode. So let's talk about the alliance, because one of the seeds, the epilogue scene on season 1 is White Rose, but in the male persona of Minister Zhang, or whatever his name is, talking to Philip Price. And then that gets fleshed out through season 2, where it's apparent that the Dark Army may or may not be working with E-Corp, or White Rose is playing two sides against each other. Or there might be a third element, which is being spearheaded by Elliot. So what do we think of sort of the... I'm leaving that one there because I have my own theories on that. What do we think about the whole evolution of China, E-Corp, annexing Congo to like bail out E-Corp, that whole political structure? What did you think about that part of the season?
I mean, it's kind of scary to think about how much of what, you know, we see and read could possibly be orchestrated by things that we have no idea about or completely outside of our control. And
are you suggesting this might be real, and are we having a dystopian observation?
Well, and actually that's something that I've thought about a lot in the show is like, am I viewing this as like a parallel universe? Am I, like, as a viewer, am I just like immersing myself in whatever this is? So that becomes almost like a little separate question for me. I haven't answered for myself yet.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
If that makes any sense. So yeah, when I think about, you know, we're getting a bird's eye view of what feels like it could be possible, of like how is everything working together, and it gets a little scary.
There have been interviews, and I can't quote any right now, but I would have to go back, and I don't know if the Mr. Rewatch people know what I'm talking about, but where when the show started, they would say to Sam, like, this is, like, Rami would say things like, this doesn't really happen, this can't really, and things would actually, in real life, where we're living now, some of the things that, some of the topics and the scenarios that were being written about in 2015 and 16 were being realized, like, in the real world in some capacity. So for me, that's scary in and of itself, and the F Society being very closely inspired by the anonymous hacktivist group that's like a real group who will put out videos and things like that. So for me, I watch the show and it's like all of this, the fact that they're using these real political scenarios and these actual political, you know, Obama and alluding to Trump and things like that. It brings it home to me. I actually liked it. I liked that all of that was incorporated, but it did scare me a little bit.
Yeah, was that really President Obama, or did they just splice that all together?
I think that was portrayed like a deep fake, maybe.
It was a deep fake because
that's
who does it?
Term that I just learned this year. I'm
Jordan
horribly
Peele
unhip.
does the voice. I think it's Jordan Peele who does the voice.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Peele and
yes,
yeah.
Yep.
I didn't really think it was him, but I just thought I'd ask the question.
So good, though. So believable, though.
It is believable.
I might have got it. I think it's him.
Yep, it's him.
You've mentioned Agent DiPiero, Dom. She talks to Alexa in a lonely way. Does that take you out of it, or does that just like firm up this sort of reality for you? Does it suspend your disbelief? I know
it makes me feel bad for Dom.
Well,
Yeah.
at minimum, yes. But it
It's
also
very believable.
it is for me. It kind of, I couldn't help being cynical and saying, "Well, there's your product placement," the whole time. And of course, you watch this on Prime if you're watching this.
I just thought.
Oh, that's true. I didn't even think of that.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought it was. She has no one else to talk to but Alexa. It's kind of. I don't know. It was very sad and depressing.
Yeah.
I didn't think it would. It didn't. It made me more invested in it. If anything, I don't think it was the opposite.
Do you like her character?
I do. I keep thinking that she knows something we don't.
She's very smart. Dom is very smart. The Alexa thing, to address your question, didn't bother me, or it didn't. It didn't make me pause. I think it just, for me, reiterated her loneliness and her isolation, and the fact that she said it in the series. She said it to Darlene. I have no life. This is my life, and this. So it didn't bother me. I think the connection to this technology kind of that's how I tied into it. But I think I think, as far as characters go, I think Dom can be underrated too. When you think of the things the dots that she connects, and the fact that nobody seems to take her as seriously as I think she makes revelations that are spot on, and her gut instincts are amazing. But she's got a team of people who are her obstacles, who are stopping her at every turn for whatever reason. Whether they don't trust her or they have their own motivations, or that's just how the FBI works. I don't know. But I think she can be a little underrated.
I can definitely see her in season 3 or 4, like, making a choice to help maybe one of the members of F Society. Because you can see, I don't know, I can see her making that decision, like hiding evidence or something, that she comes to the realization that America would be better off served by her doing this action as opposed to the other one.
Going back to your question about Dom with the Alexa, like, we're in this show, we see a lot of characters dealing with loneliness. You see Elliot dealing with loneliness through drug addiction and through the manifestation of Mr. Robot, and there's a lot of real lonely people in this show, and so I didn't think of it as product placement, but I made a connection.
I was being cheeky.
Oh, that's fine.
That is funny.
Totally
I'm like,
fine.
oh, totally, of course it is.
No, absolutely.
Because I was watching it on Amazon Prime.
But I think
It's the only way you can.
I think you just feel, it makes you feel for her, and it helps you understand why she is so committed to this, because this is her life's work, and you are rooting for her because she's not wrong. You're like, okay, yep, you're seeing these puzzle pieces, but nobody's seeing it either. Like, yeah.
I have nothing to add. I like her character, but I think I'm waiting to see more.
Yep.
To have a real opinion about Dom. That's where I'll leave that.
She reminds me of the character from, everybody seen Boondock Saints, the FBI agent?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so long ago, but yeah.
That eccentric, really out there character. I don't know.
Dave, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that she turns into, like, my favorite character or my second favorite character.
Okay.
Cool.
She has a fantastic arc through this whole series.
She does, yeah. I would agree with that.
We kind of already talked about the whole black room thing / red room thing. The David Lynch inspired thing. We went through a lot of this. So I guess what I would ask, and this is going to be a weirdly asked question because of where we are in the story, and some people are further. Do we learn what, I'll ask it this way. Do we learn what the plant is? China can keep the plant. They keep talking about this plant that seems to be in China. Do we learn what that is later? And should we care about it?
The one that White Rose runs?
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's something to do with the waste, that's the chemical waste. I don't know.
The Washington Township plant that we're talking about? No?
Does China have purview over that plant? Because that's where
Or are you talking about... Oh, so I think there are some... That storyline kind of evolves.
Okay.
I would say from my perspective, I never 100% understood what it was.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to go with that. Until I watch 3 and 4 again, maybe I'll connect that a little bit better.
Well, they spend an awful lot of time talking about it, and as I was going through kind of summarizing for this show, for this episode that we're recording, I was just like, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to care about that, but they keep talking about it. Like, especially White Rose as Minister Zhang, and
then
When they try to shut down my plant.
yeah, so
I
all
would
that stuff.
keep it in mind.
Keep it in the back
Yeah,
pocket.
we can't say too much
Agreed.
more about it though without going into 3 and 4.
And then, so I'm going to ask the people who've not finished the show, what do we think about Elliot and his seeming connection to the Dark Army? They keep hinting at Phase 2. Phase 2.
I'm at a point that I cannot
Crap!
speak. I cannot speak on it.
Journey alone by yourself.
I'm so sorry. I was like, no.
We're in the Steel
Attention to
Mountain.
me as if my lips are sealed.
Yep.
I guess the only thing I've been wondering is how many more personalities, not for lack of
That's
a better
my
term.
question as well.
Does he have? How many more identities does Elliot have?
Amy already told me she can't answer that
I
question.
can't answer anything.
For a
I
while-
don't want anything spoiled for anybody.
I thought he was Terrell for a while,
I had that suspicion as
Terrell's
well.
a big
but then he
That's a
gets
common one, yeah.
shot at the end of season 2 and it looks real. I don't know if it's actually real. And then there's the little reveal with Darlene and Dom, where I don't remember what exactly she says, but it's something to the effect of, Darlene says something that leads me to believe, like, you don't know what you're talking about yet, to Dom. But I haven't seen anything in season 3 yet, so...
I don't know about, what do you mean about that moment? Because at the end of the season, Dom brings her into their war room.
And shows them everything.
And shows them everything.
And she says something to the effect of, something like, you don't know what you're talking about, to Dom, and then it cuts off right there. I'm like, what have we not seen here?
It's Elliot. Elliot's the key.
Am I wrong? Like, am I remembering that correct, right? I just watched it, and it left me kind of shocked that they left it like that.
I just finished it a few days ago. I don't remember the cutting off.
Well,
I remember the conversation.
Her being like, oh my god, or holy shit, or something.
But it looked like she was like a deer in headlights, and then when she realized something, she said something to the effect of that made me think, oh, there's something else here.
So I think her shock seems to be the realization that Terrell is in the center of the FBI's web, because she is assuming, I think, that either Elliot or F Society are in the middle of it. And so she has this sort of light bulb moment, but I don't know that she communicates that to Dom just yet. I don't think Dom knows what Darlene knows. Is that going to capture it?
A little bit. So now that makes you just wonder if her moment is maybe she's going to try to pin everything on him. I don't know.
So we'll have to wait and see.
Well, they were going to blow up the building where they were reassembling the paper records. So, and that's where they cut that off because he shoots them and then it fades to black. So we don't know what happened.
Has Mr. Robot is flashing in and out and staticky.
Because that's why I think my theory is, and of course they'll know if I'm debunked later or not, is that was a real shooting.
Yeah.
because Mr. Robot
and Terrell didn't.
Yeah, went out of screen or vision. Tyrell's still there. And Tyrell is also, we see kind of the flashback scenes where Elliot, as Mr. Robot, is manifesting Mr. Robot, is talking to Tyrell. Like at the very top of the season finale, they're back at Coney Island, and you get filled in all these different details that you only saw bits and pieces of in the season up until the point. And I really do think that Tyrell, at least my theory is, he's in this because this is another avenue toward whatever it is he thinks he wants.
Doing whatever it takes.
Right, as opposed to his downfall and everything from E-Corp. So I think it's real.
I do too.
And he also calls Angela distraught, and he says, I love him, and all this other business.
Which is why I didn't realize Angela and Terrell were so close until that phone call, I guess.
Well, but that's also what comes out of the black room scene, is that all of a sudden Angela is telling Lawyer, don't call me anymore, and seems to have been recruited by White Rose for whatever it is they're doing at that moment. They're all silent.
Well, no, I mean,
the silence is deafening.
But one of the things that I noticed watching the second time around, she goes to her lawyer's house, is that like SUV or whatever.
Yes.
That looks like Tyrell's. When I saw it the first time and the second time, I was like, is that whose vehicle that is? And maybe our friends can comment on that too or not. But that was a connection I made after that particular scene when he called her. I was like, oh, maybe that's whose car that was. That drove her to her lawyer's house. I don't know. That was something that wasn't really clear to me.
I think they're all interconnected, and my theory is Mr. Elliot's dissociative personalities are setting up pieces against each other, and he's leading them all. That's my theory.
It was such a treat when you watch season 3 and 4. Like, I had so many theories as I went along, and it's so nice to have the storylines like fleshed out.
Yeah.
It's so great.
So here's one quick question. So are the timelines all skewed up, or are they all congruent with each other?
What
It's
timeline?
pretty linear.
Okay, I was just curious. Maybe one character wasn't quite at the same point in time, and we're seeing like something that happened in the past or not.
No, he's right.
No,
It's
I
linear.
think it all kind of happens in real time. Aaron can correct me, but
I think so.
No, I
most
think
of the show is just it's literally like minute by minute what's actually happening. There's not a whole lot of jumping forward or back.
So, okay, I won't ask that question. Never mind. Because I don't want to be spoiled. And then when we record our next episode, all of the hamstringing will be gone, and you can all be married. But obviously, we're all very excited. Is there anything else that you wanted to kind of cover? What was your favorite twist?
I liked Joanna almost letting herself get beat up.
Let's talk about her breaking her own water. That was in season 1.
Oh, God, I can't. You can talk about it.
What the heck?
She's just insane. She does what needs to be done, but...
Sending her bodyguard to go kill, I don't remember his name now.
Kareem.
And then asking him, did he look you in the eye first? Because if you just kill someone instantly, you're robbing them of an explanation. Like, that stuck with me. I'm like, oh.
Maybe she's the American Psycho.
Well, remember? We already talked about that a little bit.
I know.
The Stockholm Syndrome.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. So what was your favorite twist?
Of season 2? Or just
All of them. Of the ones we discussed today. Not seasons 3 and 4.
Darlene has his sister because I really didn't see it coming.
Mine too.
I think that's definitely one of them. Is his sister discovering that he was in the prison was another thing, because that made me realize that he has these many layers of this mental coping, that he has these worlds that he creates, because that made me think of, the Full House episode or whatever. So that was my favorite. Coming out of season 1 and 2, it was like, oh, I like this, because now I don't know what I'm walking into going into 3 and 4.
I think my favorite...
I was a really big fan of when Leon killed the neo-Nazis.
Yes!
Oh!
Yes!
That's a good moment.
And he said
Talk about
something
it.
about White Rose.
Yeah, he's like, send your regard. Yeah, the White Rose line. You're like, oh, he's Dark Army too. Ah, this all makes sense now.
Yeah.
He was his bodyguard in prison.
I loved it. Oh, I love that moment.
Yeah. I love the character too. He's number 2 for me.
He was another one of those characters that you tend to disregard at first as a side character, and you realize, wait, there's more to him than meets the eye.
It makes me wonder, why is he in prison? Is it just he just got planted there to protect Elliot, or did he do something?
Makes me wonder who else is Dark Army.
I know. Mm-hmm. Any one of us could be Dark Army.
I'm not Dark Army.
That's exactly what a Dark Army
I know.
would say.
I was Dark Army, but I admit it. So we'll do a couple of wrap-up questions, but before I do those, is there anything else that we haven't discussed that you want to get out of your season 1 and 2 feels and brains? Try to be hip with the lingo.
That sounds right.
There was one thing, and now I'm reading my notes, I can't think what exactly happened, but did Angela say something about loving Terrell or something when she got off the phone with him? I wrote down the word Angela, Terrell, and love. I'm like, what?
He said, I love him. She said, I do too.
Yes.
About
talking
Elliot.
about Elliot.
Okay, that to me seemed, I don't know, odd.
And it's not romantical love. It's
no,
like
it's fanatical.
Worshipping
almost.
Kind of cult leader love. That's how I took it in the moment.
For
sure.
Tyrell or for both of them?
Tyrell definitely for
Yeah.
Elliot. I think not necessarily for Angela, but I need more of Angela's story. I mean, I think she naturally loves him because they've been friends for such a long time. And they also shared the kiss on the subway in season 2. So I think there's genuine love there too. But I also think I just think there's the potential for something. And I have a theory. We'll see if I'm right.
That's what
won't be right.
I find, like, when I think about my favorite characters in the show, Tyrell always pops up just because he is so fanatical. And there's something about the way that he speaks about fate and we're gods, and it seems like this bigger sense of something else going on here. And so that's what I always find so compelling about Tyrell, and I always like his scenes, and I just feel like there is this sort of crazy fanatical aspect to him.
What I always thought was I draw the parallel between him and Elliot, because one of their delusions you think is really dangerous because he has multiple personalities, but then you realize the other one is more delusional and even more dangerous.
Yes!
I actually, by the end of season 2, thought they were two sides of a very thin coin with Tyrell and Elliot. Because Tyrell, I think, doesn't necessarily... I almost get sociopath vibes off him.
Yeah.
He doesn't quite realize what he's doing or why he's doing it. He just knows he has to, and to do whatever is necessary.
Yeah, it comes from this bigger purpose to him.
Yes. Whereas Elliot has the big purpose, but it's fragmented because he's got this other stuff going on. He's looking at his notes again.
I am, because one of the things that just struck me is, like, for Terrell, like, he seems more of a religious fanatic almost, but
yes.
Yeah.
Which leads me back to the monologue he does about religion earlier in the season. He says something to the effect of, they're just paying fanboys for their poorly written sci-fi franchises. He's like, I don't listen to my imaginary friend, why should I listen to yours? And it kind of just strikes a chord with me that maybe he's talking more about Terrell. than actual religion.
So you're thinking Tyrell is one of his personalities?
I don't know what I want to think anymore.
You know what?
Elliot certainly thought that though at the end. I mean, that was something that made even Elliot question. Because he does say, you know, he doesn't think Tyrell is real at the very, very end of that last episode.
It almost makes me think maybe Elliot's the personality. I don't know. It's weird.
Well, that would be Matrix-like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One question I had is, I want to know who's ordering these hits on people. Because it's Dark Army, but who's in charge of the Dark Army ordering the hits on the
That's
diner?
what I'm saying.
And everything. Is it White Rose? Is it Elliot? Is it
Right.
who?
Right.
Or is E-Corp in and all of it?
Well, because those hits come out of nowhere.
They are the most...
Pervasive?
yeah, they're the most powerful conglomerate in the world.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It raises just as many questions as it answers.
It does! But not in the same way Lost did. I hope it at least leaves you feeling less frustrated and lost. That's the hallmark
Your
measurement.
questions are going to get answered. Don't worry.
Okay, cool. Yes! Already
I'll
doing
spoil that
better.
much for you.
Good.
There's one thing I think this show does really well, and it's the use of tertiary characters.
Yes.
Like Angela's awful boyfriend Ollie,
Yes.
Cisco, and just like these smaller players that do
Shayla.
help the plot push forward, and it helps the character development. Like you see Angela just like she gives up on her past life to go forward because Ollie's such an idiot and gets like her computer hacked. That's like her breaking point to him, right?
Uh-huh.
They do a really good job with the tertiary characters.
I
I
agree.
agree. Yeah.
Yep. I'm glad you brought that up because I was just thinking about like Ollie and Cisco and
I like
Fernando,
Cisco.
the drug
Yeah, I
dealer
like
guy,
Cisco.
like how all of that plays out.
And Fernando, because I had to do some research, I know he comes back. So I do not like Fernando, but he is very rich character that's been, you know, we know a lot about Fernando. He's not a good guy. They do flesh out the supporting characters really well.
Yeah.
So
What do you think about Derek, the bartender? Do you think he's going to have any kind of...
Derek the bartender.
The one that Joanna's leading along to frame Scott?
Oh.
Yeah, she makes him kind of her patsy.
Right. I mean, he's so frat boy, I don't care.
Well, no, Dave just mentioned tertiary characters, so I'm like, oh, he's one of them.
He is one of them, yeah.
And Cisco's kind of frat boy, but he's frat boy with computer skills with a Z at the
Well,
end.
and he died, right?
Cisco died, yeah, and the hit on
Yeah,
the
he ends up,
diner.
they kill him.
Yeah. But I like him.
He's
And
a more
Darlene-
interesting character to me
He is.
than, you know, and this kind of goes back to what Dave was saying, where he is a three-dimensional character. He's not just some love interest for Darlene, right? You know, he does move the plot ahead, and his death, of course, getting Dom and Darlene into the same room, I think is a really rich scene, and, you know, we'll see how that plays out later, too.
Yeah. Anything else you want to make sure we cover?
I'm all tapped out.
How does Mr. Robot compare to TV shows in general for you? Where does it rank in your personal favorites? Or you can reserve the question till the end, since Jeremy sighed long and hard.
Well, it's one of those shows that I dread watching it when I haven't watched it in a while, but once I get going, so it moves up and down my radar. Like some days it's a 8, some days it's a 5, some days it's a struggle to turn it on.
I think that's a fair question to wait for the next podcast.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through season 3 right now, and I have a really good feeling that this is going to be a top 10 for me.
Okay.
All shows. I have a really, maybe 5, maybe top 5.
Oh.
I have a good feeling about it.
Okay.
But along with very
Cautiously
bad feelings.
optimistic.
Yes.
Can't wait to
Yes.
talk about for
Yes.
3 and 4.
I want to hear how people are going to answer this question when we record next time.
Yes. Yep. I'm with you.
Do you want to reserve and wait like Amy did?
I'll reserve just so we have, you know, all the answers together.
Fair enough. I know. It's an unusual episode to record like this, but I always think it's fun when we get the mix of who's in the timeline watching it.
It is fun. Yeah, I've liked having the conversation this way.
I do kind of like having a couple of people here that have watched the entire season or series, because they do know when kind of, oh, hold on, you're going to get that.
It's
Yeah,
almost too
right.
bad that it's a podcast and not like a live podcast that we video, because the facial expressions that are working on the people's not Dave, I can't see you, Dave, sorry, but the facial expressions are, they're kind of amazing.
Dave's got his F Society mask on, you just don't know.
I was gonna say Dave is our Elliot narrating.
He is! Dave, you're Elliot! Would you recommend Mr. Robot?
I did.
That's
So, yeah.
true.
I do frequently.
Amen, sister. See?
Well,
How can you not?
yeah, so I do Kylie's hair, I'm a hairdresser, and the first thing that I always try to connect with people on is TV shows. And this was one of the first ones that popped up when I found out, that you have the podcast. So
She says, what do you like to watch on TV? Well, I do a podcast and I watch a lot.
I was like,
Yes, and that's how
Oh, you watch
you were,
Mr.
'cause she
Robot.
it was probably like the second show I mentioned. Yes.
said- Yeah.
Yeah, well, I haven't watched Mr. Robot, but my friend Amy really wants me to.
Yes.
And that's how connections are made, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
And look, now we've got our friends from Mr. Rewatch.
And we have Mr. Rewatch, and we're going to plug the heck out of Mr. Rewatch,
How
too.
fun is
Because if
that?
you're watching Mr. Robot, rewatch it with them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Is there anything else you want to say right now about seasons 1 or 2, or any of those ancillary questions, or are you literally tapped out? I like to ask the question.
I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm tapped out.
Awesome.
Yes.
All right. Well, because everyone's tapped out and also just feeling the sort of, block of being able to say everything they want because we haven't, finished the show. What I'd like to do is thank Julianne, Amy, Jeremy, Dave, and Aaron from Mr. Rewatch, the last two are, for joining us to talk about Mr. Robot seasons 1 and 2. And because we've done that, it's now time for the credits. Couch Potatoes Unite! Was produced by Back Pocket Productions, run by yours truly, the Chief Couch Potato, which is really another way of saying executively produced by me, Kylie Piette. My associate producers are Krista Pennington and Selene Rezmer. I edit this podcast, and our logo is by Rebecca Wallace. Our marketing graphic artist is Krista. Our theme song was written by Sarah Milbratz and sung by Sarah, Amy McDaniel, and Kelsey Rezmer. Kelsey played the keyboard, Ian McDonough played the bass, Christian Somerville played the guitar, and the whole kit and caboodle was engineered and produced by Kyle Aspinall and Christian. We hail from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Please, if you like what you hear, take the time to rate us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, or Google Play, or wherever you find your podcasts. Give us stars, give us comments, give us reviews. Let us know how we're doing. Send us a message. We might just read it on the podcast. Tell us what you like, what you don't like, what we should keep, what we should toss. You know how it goes. And if you have suggestions on shows we might consider, contact us at our website, couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com, where we have a guest book, by email at couchpotatoesunitepodcast@gmail.com, or via our social media, Facebook, Twitter at CPU Podcast, and Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite. Though, of course, we add new and old shows to chat about around the water cooler all the time. We always have several more new episodes coming down the pike. Just listen to our intros, and if you miss old episodes or want to know in general what we cover, just find us. We are everywhere and searchable wherever you look for things on the internet. You can search for us, or you can subscribe at our website, our channels, our social media accounts. Stay up on our new events and episodes. Until the next time, the first 3 seasons of Mr. Robot are currently available to stream on Prime. We assume that season 4 is coming soon to an Amazon outlet near us, since Alexa was in the show and everything. And come on, Amazon, release season 4. In the meantime, our Mr. Robot panel will next reconvene very shortly, in fact, to talk seasons 3 and 4. So until next time, until next episode, new episodes are published every Wednesday. Keep listening, keep watching, stay tuned!
Bye-bye.
Good night.